Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is a webinar put on by both Stoneridge Software and Levridge. And basically, we're going to be focusing on running a smarter ag business, how we connect to data to make better decisions. I'm going to go ahead and just take care of some housekeeping at the very beginning here. Just at the very beginning, obviously, a copy of this recording will be available after the event. So if you'd like to watch it afterwards and see kind of the cool stuff that we're going to show in more detail, feel free to do that. We'll take questions and comments as we go through this, as well as we have a guest speaker here as well today, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then also, as always, please give us feedback on what you liked or didn't like about this format, the content, or even the speakers, as any time that we're going through this, we always want to improve. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in right away. I basically want to introduce myself first, and then John, I'm going to introduce you as well. So hello, everyone. My name is Scott Frappier. I am the Chief AI Architect at Stoneridge Software, really focusing around using AI to automate business processes across many different industries, manufacturing, distribution, professional services. And today, we're actually going to cover a little bit more of the agriculture-based perspective of this with Mr. John Melland. And John, do you want to give an introduction and background?
Yeah, hey Scott, thanks for having me, and I appreciate being able to speak today. And running a smarter ag business is near and dear to my heart because prior to being the CEO of Levridge, which I am right now, I was the CFO of a company, a large regional grain elevator retail agronomy company called the Arthur Company. So, being able to connect data, being able to generate information out of your system, basically to run a smarter ag business is near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited to be here and share the floor with you, Scott. So
No, I
looking
really
forward to it.
appreciate that. Right. So this is going to be for the webinar format that we're doing here today. We're really going to be talking, right, John, about some of the challenges in the agriculture industry when it comes to data and modernization and the platform, and then how that impacts like users and their experience around this, right? So it's going to be more back and forth, obviously, as we're talking through this. So once again, we're watching the attendee chat as well. So if you have questions for John or for I, feel free to plug them in there and we'll make sure we get at them. I guess maybe, John, do you want to kind of go through like what we're going to be covering today from an agenda perspective? I know I've got two demos I'm going to be showing, but I know there's some unique challenges that we want to kind of cover here as well today, right?
Yeah, I think to set the stage, I think we're going to talk a little bit about what are the unique challenges that agribusinesses are facing, and how those businesses should think about moving out of kind of the past and into the future. I'm excited because you can't really talk about the future without talking about AI. So we've got a
Right.
couple of demos and Scott, you're the greatest to talk about that. So we'll show a little bit about what you guys have been working on and kind of talk a little bit about what that means for the future for agribusinesses. And first and foremost, when you think about the unique challenges that agribusinesses face, it really kind of comes down to a couple things, and the main thing really is legacy systems, right?
Yeah.
And those across the agriculture landscape, we have legacy ERPs that have been around a long time, really 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. We run into businesses that really are on the trying to figure out, okay, we've been on this system for 20 plus years. What does it mean to get into the new, and what is the future of ERP for us? And really that poses the first and most unique challenge is that ERP in agribusiness is legacy. Been around a long time. It kind of does what it needs to do, but does it really position you for growth and position you for the future? And so first and foremost, Levridge on top of Microsoft D365 Finance and Supply Chain. I'll probably shorthand that as F&O.
Right. Great.
As is kind of the ERP that's ready for growth and future proofing into the next decade and beyond. And so, if these systems, these legacy systems, do what they need to do, there's kind of still a hidden cost there that relates to it still works. And really what that means really is kind of falling behind your competitors as they move off of old systems and then to the new. So there is this sea change that we're seeing where across the industry, companies are trying to figure out, hey, we're on old legacy systems. We need to be able to go into the future. And those that are doing that are going to be ahead of the curve, and those that are not are going to fall behind, right? And so what does that mean for operations and efficiencies? Well, this is a great kind of segue into what, Scott, you're going to start talking about is, when we think about what future means, it's a lot to do with, how do we get automation involved into our operations? How do we interact with our ERP in a new way? Is it clicking through to find the data that I need, or is there some other way that we can get information? Is it more of a conversation with our, ERP? So, all of that leads into kind of finding those tasks that are things that are redundant or menial or take a lot of time, and trying to figure out maybe a new way to do things. So, Scott, did I tee that up enough for you to be able to kind of hit that out of the park here in your next on your
Yeah,
topic? So,
I think so. I think, John, like here's what I kind of love about this. Like when we think about we look at it from a technology perspective to kind of start, right? And that's not the only piece of the puzzle, basically. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to the end user experience, that's really key. In agriculture, there's a wide variety of different types of personalities that have different roles that they're trying to accomplish. And there's just a need from a technology perspective to support kind of what people are seeing in other industries. And examples of that would be making it so that you can automate your inbox, for example, or organize your inbox because you're starting to see more email traffic because more people are starting to use email. You may have, for example, more price or profit margins that you have to look at in more detail because you have more price pressure potentially depending upon the commodity that you may be selling and the volume of that, right? So I think to your point, John, like the need for automation, it just seems to be scaling. And one of the things I always kind of joke around is that the most advanced distribution supply chain company I've ever seen on the planet are agriculture based companies. Like they move so much product through so many different means, whether it's train, whether it's truck, or also overseas. And once again, that not having that automation where you've got companies that are way smaller that don't have that type of enablement or even industries for that, but they do have a lot of technology, they're able to really offset some of those costs and that user satisfaction. So I guess, John, yeah, I say come off mute. What do you think of that?
well, I was just gonna say, you just think about the volume that gets
Yeah.
transacted, and the volume of product, and the transactions follow that. There's, hundreds of millions of bushels that, in a company that could be transacted upon, and the amount of data that's necessary to kind of follow that transaction through is immense, and you have to be able to understand and how to get that information, first of all, in and through efficiently, but also then how do you get the data out to make sure you make good business decisions with that. So
Right.
yeah, I think that was well said. So
Nailed it. So I want to just let's go through and show an example of this, John, because I think from the audience's perspective, like you could look at slides all day and we could be talking all day on all the concepts. Like let's like show something that dives a little bit deeper here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go through and then just highlight basically a given scenario that we have tackled in the past where basically we can go through and interact with a business system using natural language. So when we think about this, like I want to back up a little bit because I know for many of you, you might be on an older system, and that's totally fine in terms of its capabilities for what it was. But when we talk about now, we talk about, for example, using phones and different devices and websites, and you've got growers that are using text messaging quite often, and now they're moving to email. There's all these different technologies that are being introduced. But one of the key things here is that it's pretty common, for example, that you may need to do a request to basically go through and then get a bid on a particular contract, right? Now, how would you do that before? Well, maybe you call your agronomist or whoever your contact is, totally valid, easy to do. But remember, there's a lot of people now that like the self service, and I absolutely love self service because it allows me at my own time to then do something without waiting for somebody else. I'm kind of an independent spirit like that, John, in some ways. But the beauty here is that the balance of this, where you can still, like, business is about the personal relationships with people, but the enablement of technology allows us maybe to go a little bit further to then have some of those self-service scenarios. So just as an example here, if I go to my email address, I'm going to go to my, if I can spell my name right, my pre-sales address right here. And let's pretend that Scott Frappier isn't Scott Frappier. It's somebody else that manages bids and contracts and all those types of details. And so in this example, what I'm doing just really rapidly is I'm getting a corn bid price, as you can see here, for 5,000 bushels of corn that will be delivered in July of 2026 to ALEC. So I did ALX as the code. You could do Alexandria, you could say the town, the city, whatever it is. And what I can do is I can send that along basically to go through and start processing. Now, I'm not going to wait. We'll see it pop up as we go through the demonstration, because if I sat here and talked for the next 5 minutes, it would probably get a little bit boring. But what I want to kind of highlight here is that when you saw that email go out, what's really happening in the background is that that person or that individual, that Scott F at stoneridgepresales.com, is actually not a person. It's an AI agent. And what that AI agent allows us to do is to take those inbound requests or emails that we get, and from there basically go through and then process those particular emails by then looking into a system and getting that information. So you can see in my personal one here, it looks like I got some cool PlayStation news that's coming out, which is always great. But at the bottom down here, I ran it at 12:23, that same prompt. And what we can see when I open this up is that it generated basically a commodity price quote that was based off of the data that was inside of our system. Because we have a ticker, we were watching the Chicago Board of Trade, for example, for corn to be able to see what that pricing information is. And what we can see here is that I got a quote basically for this for July 2026 for the delivery period for 5,000 bushels, where my futures is at 458, my basis is 4 cents, and then my cash bid is basically 462 per bushel. Now, what's really cool about this in my mind, John, is that this made it so that I could use AI to address something that might be really kind of common in your business, because you may have a lot of different bids or quotes or price quotes on the commodities that you have that people are making externally to be able to get some of that information. And just to kind of show it here at the very top now, I waited for a little bit. You can see 113, it just came through. If I click on that, same result that was there. So it is processing that in the background to go through and do that. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Like, that's a quote that ends up inside of a business system. We can go further than that. So this isn't about like one-shot concepts where all of a sudden you just send the information or do the one request. The thing about AI in a modern platform like Levridge is that you then have the ability to be conversational with it. So just as an example here, if I reply then to this commodity price quote and I say, turn this into a contract, please. And I will joke about this. It's always be kind to your AI. We'll just say it that way. And we'll go ahead and send it away. And what should happen here in the background in a little bit is that it'll actually go and then do that transaction inside of the business system. And John, for our second example I'm going to show today, we're going to actually show that exact process. But I guess the key thing here, if I go back, we sent it out. We can see in this example, a purchase contract was also generated, but you can see then that off of that reply that I sent, that it was basically able to go through and assign a contract number. I told it inside of the agent to build some default terms that are related to it. We can see that our futures basis and cash price information came inside of there. And then you can see that it added then at the bottom here some of that additional information. So once again, this isn't about like, we're not trying to boil the ocean with AI because AI does not tackle every scenario perfectly. For anyone that's used it, that should probably resonate with you. But you are able to use it to automate these types of processes very easily. And in these examples, if it saves somebody 10 minutes a day, and let's say it's 5 people you save 10 minutes a day, and then you multiply that by 2080 hours or whatever number of days you have in your company, maybe it's 267 work days, for example, it saves a lot of time. And we can see at 115 here, that one came through for a different contract number, and we can see that it actually went through and then generated that contract inside of here as well. So I guess, John, with that, like, what do you think? Like, I think this could go further than just email as well, right? As we do this,
Yeah, exactly. And certainly there's a lot of bushels that get sold over text. I've even
right?
heard some Snapchat even, it's bizarre what's happening. But I think, I mean, when I look at this, I think a lot of originators or merchandisers probably sit up and kind of take note in terms of like, you mean there can be an automated way for me to respond, or for the company to respond to growers as calls come in, there's a lot of times, hey, market's running up. I'm on the phone with a grower, but somebody else or three other people are calling me at the same time. I can't respond to everybody at once.
Right.
This takes that and basically automates that to be able to respond in a way that is faster than I could just being on the phone with somebody else. Right now, I think others might also be taking note in terms of like getting a little heartburn and like, hey, wait, I still want to make sure I understand what's going on back and forth, which is true. But that's also something that we have that you don't have to like automatically do this. There can be approval set in place in terms of like what actually gets entered and submitted and posted into the system for contracts, right? So like that's that kind of the change that happens in terms of being comfortable with allowing the system to do things on your behalf, right? And I love it. Copilot is a copilot, not a pilot, right? It's helping you do your job better, not taking over your job. And I think that's just this is a great example of what can be accomplished via agents to help do things faster on your behalf, really. So,
And you
and that's
nailed
what
it.
an
I mean,
agent is. So,
right? And you
yeah.
nailed it. Like when it comes to like when you think about like this is a maybe a $20,000 contract, right? In terms of what the impact is for net revenue. You in this example, it may make more sense to have, like you said, an approval in here because the agent can ask for approval or indicate to whoever is managing that grower or that relationship of that contract, and from there can then accept it. So we like to show the end to end as an example just to show the process. Adding steps for what we call human in the loop is the concept that's there, is really baked into this, and it's also supported then. And I think that that's a key thing just to note is that that's what a modern business system supplies now. Whereas if you would have tried to have done this in a different system without having that capability, like we all know we've gone through the development of it, and it would have been expensive, right? So let me blow your mind a
Well,
little bit more, right? Go ahead,
not
John. Yep.
only that, Scott, yeah, while you prepare your next demo, I'll jump in here too and just say not only that, but we've talked to people that have tried on legacy systems. Their data is not set up in a way that actually allows them to do that, right? Talking to one mill a couple months ago, and they're like, well, we tried to hook up this AI bot into our system, and it just can't read the data. The data structure is so old on this legacy system that it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? And so not only could it be expensive to do it, but you might not even be able to get it done just based on what type of data structure in your legacy system is. So, but
Nailed it.
yeah.
That's
All
a
right.
really
You
good.
mentioned that. Yeah, you
Go ahead.
mentioned the next one that you were going to show. I'm really interested in this one too. So,
Yeah, so this is an example. So in that agent, we were dealing with email basically to interact with a grower, a customer, a client. There's different terms depending upon obviously what kind of market you're satisfying in ag. But let's talk about another scenario. So there's another scenario of data entry. And in that situation, what was happening is we were doing email back and forth to create a quote, which is going into a business system, grabbing that quote details. And when I say business system, I mean Leverage. And then from there, generating the sales contract inside of Leverage as well, that then has all the delivery information. Well, there are many other scenarios where maybe, for example, you've got some records that need to be updated from some type of other system, right? And so this is an example of an agent that we call an autonomous agent. And once again, you can use these with the Leverage product because when we think about AI and connectivity and data, the great thing about these modern platforms is that it's not. It used to be in the past. I don't know, John, if you ever tracked the technology side of this, but it used to be in the past where, like with Steve Ballmer back in the day at Microsoft, everything was like we have to defeat Linux, or it was always closed source. It was always something where the company would own or Microsoft would own the data and you wouldn't have access to it. And that was culturally just kind of something back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s that was pretty common. I'm dating myself a little bit because I was around those eras. So, but in the modern era now, we talk about we move to this architecture of microservices, and what that means is that we needed applications that could communicate with each other that were open so that we could interact with that data and then get to the business challenge without being kind of paywalled, so to speak, by a vendor, basically. So this is an example then of where we say, okay, we've got an end user that's constantly doing a bunch of work that we want to then have it do the transactions inside of the business system. So the AI agent itself will actually open up Leverage, and it will then go into Leverage, go to a contract, and then do the data updates inside of the system, very much like what we had in our prior example, but this is a little bit more complex. So I'm going to show that. We're going to go to an agent inside of here, and inside of our agents, we have an agent that we've been working on that we're trying to get into production here pretty quickly. So this is a pretty cool example. But what we have here is a commodity contract agent. And what this agent's objective to do is in the instructions here is that it's supposed to basically take data from one system and then enter it into the other system. So you can imagine it's eliminating that swivel chair concept that we talk about inside of the industry. Now, in order to do that, what happens on this agent is that there's a trigger so that when a commodity contract is certified inside of our system, we want it to start doing something with that. Now, I'm not going to go through and go to the contract and show all these multiple screens. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy and paste in basically what happens when it does that prompting. So what I'm going to do here, because I want you guys to see all the magic that these agents can do. This is really cool. And the reason I find it very cool is because it's going to show you step by step, basically, what the agent is doing to get to that goal. So what we do is we pass in something to the agent and just look at this gook as just this is telling the agent that there's something to now move from one system to the other. So what does it do? Well, it enters into here. It says, all right, I got to grab the contract. There's the contract, which is foreign to me at this point, but the agent knows exactly what it is. Then what it does here is it connects then to Dynamics 365 to start going through that processing. And what you can see here in the background is that this looks a little bit of developer-ish, but what it's doing is it's going through opening up basically that lev sales commodity contract. It's then filtering and finding that contract like an end user would be navigating to be able to do that. And from there, it's going through and then doing those updates for the contract by navigating to it, opening it, updating the record. You can see it's filtering it now, just like in Excel with our auto filter capabilities, and grabbing that particular contract. Now, once again, John, I'm not going to go through all of this step by step, I wanted to show this visibly, but I ran it before as well a little bit earlier. And what we can see here is that as the agent is actually processing, it opened up F&O. It expanded the delivery tab. It went and updated the pricing on row one and row two. And what's really powerful about this is that we can actually get it where instead of just going through and then sending information, for example, to a screen that no one sees, this is the example I want to show. Part of the instructions I told the agent is after you are done processing it, please send me an email with all the details as to whether it processed successfully, what delivery period was updated, what pricing details were happening, was there a rounding issue between the two systems because we're entering in these contracts in our CRM system that we have, and then we're copying it over to the Levridge solution, for example. And you can see that it basically gives me all of the content needed to craft this email to understand what was happening here. And here's the thing I just want to kind of highlight really quickly, John. If I just really rapidly go to my agents inside of here and I look at my email processing, this email right here this is what I told it to do for that email. I didn't tell it to list all the steps that were successful. I didn't tell it this is the exact format you need. I didn't tell it any of that. I said, you're acting like an ag expert. Please send me information that would be impactful for an ag expert to basically go through and generate that. So this is just, once again, John, just a deeper example of then using AI to actually enter in transactions inside of your environment, which is that automation need. And I think from a data perspective, really important long term.
I think that's fantastic. I think what we've highlighted today really is just something where it changes the way people can think about how they interact with their accounting system, right? And not only that, but where can you identify the things that are occurring that maybe are repetitive, or things that your employees are doing that maybe are less valuable, that you can turn into an agent or turn into some type of automation functionality that really allows then your employees to do more valuable work, right? And what we've also seen is that really it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do this on systems that are not ready for the future, right? And that are not on a platform like Levridge is on D365 Finance and Supply Chain, to be able to interact and interconnect with these tools like Copilot and agents. So
Yeah.
that I think it's really exciting, kind of the demos that you just provided, and really kind of the sky's the limit. Really, we provided two separate distinct examples, but there's any number of ways you can go in terms of what agents can do for you.
Yeah, I can get just John just to kind of ideate on that before. I know there's a couple questions that came in, but it's kind of like one example we were talking about was when we look at unloading during harvest, being able to look at with a camera how many trucks are in line to basically state how long it's going to be based on the average unload time. Like these are things now that are very possible for us to easily do where we don't have to partition out the camera. Instead, we just take the image to an AI agent and say, hey, count how many trucks are here, get that number back, and then multiply that by the average unload time. Well, then we've got at least an average time to make it a little bit easier for people to understand where do I need to go to drop off my harvest, right? So that's a
Yeah.
pretty cool thing as well that could be done. So I guess just really quickly here, John, I got a couple questions that came into the Q&A here and they weren't in the attendee chat. So the first one was really, what are the next steps that we can really use to kind of move forward as part of this? And where would you think, John, the first next steps would be for customers that are wanting to use AI automation and really want to start going down a path of really data consistency and looking at that the future 20 years? Like what would your next steps be there, John, for that?
Yeah, it really is an analysis of where you are in the business and what is what you where you want to go, right? And that's where getting in contact with Stoneridge to really talk about an analysis of, hey, this is where our system is, and get on kind of a roadmap and do a roadmap towards kind of looking at business process and seeing, hey, how can I become more efficient on a newer system like Leverage on D365? And really that's where kind of reaching out and kind of talking to the experts in both the technology and in the industry is really important. Reaching out to some AI firm that doesn't have any idea about what it means to contract with growers is not going to be a good fit, right? You need to have both. You need to have the technology knowledge as well as the industry knowledge, and that's where Stoneridge and Leverage are really good fits. So that's
Yep.
really the first step.
I love that. And the other thing I got here, I think this is more in my camp from your experience. How can I start to put better data practices into motion so I'm ready to move to the cloud or to use I mean, kind of to John's point, I mean, the first thing obviously is contact a partner to start ideating on that. There's lots of data cleanup activities that you can do in your current system that will help with AI in the future. And just to be super candid with that, once again, if you have it where you've got 10 different customers that mean the same thing, don't expect AI to understand that immediately, just like a new hire. Like that's going to be something that you're going to want to maybe clean up a little bit. So making sure that your data now is as clean and consistent as possible, I think really helps with AI being more accurate for you, because the less noise that you send to AI, the more true patterns it can detect to give you those narratives and those details. So yeah, I guess John, one final thing I just want to say here really quick. I saw it pop up. If you haven't, please save your spot for the Modern Agriculture Technology Day. I see that Bree posted it in the attendee chat as well. It's a great event to attend. We dig a little bit deeper beyond just AI, for example, and talk about obviously leverage and other things that are impacting the agriculture market. So obviously, we're looking at it from a technology perspective, but if you haven't signed up, it looks like on June 24th, that's going to be there, and it would be a great thing to have you. So, with that, John, I want to thank you, number one, for being here. Any parting words of wisdom that you want to leave with the audience?
No, I think just the what's possible for the future is just really exciting, and you just have to make sure you're setting yourselves up for that change to the future. And Scott, as always, it's great to be here with you, and I just really appreciate you and thank you for inviting me to be with you. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, John, appreciate your time as always. Everyone, have a great rest of your day, and hopefully, we'll see you at that Modern Agriculture Technology Day. Talk to you later.